Greetings of the day. Welcome to the course on Operations Research Technique. In earlier lecture, we have finished with estimation of various parameters of a PERT network, program evaluation and review technique. So the important terms which we have come across in PERT were optimistic time, most likely time and pessimistic time. And in that we have seen that we first evaluate activity time and then we calculate by forward pass and backward pass method expected project duration, and then we estimated the probability of completing the project. So students, in real life scenario, all projects where you are not sure regarding what is the time requirement of the project are analyzed by the concept of PERT. Where you are not sure, where there is a lot of uncertainty is there. But when we are deterministic in nature, that we know that okay, this particular activity will require this much time only, in that case we have to use other tool under project management, and that is critical path method, CPM. Once we do this, drawing early part in the evaluation for PERT and CPM till finding critical path and finding expected project duration is same. So what is the difference is, in PERT we find the probability of completing the project, or we find schedule time given probability. In PERT we find different types of floats. In CPM we find different types of floats. So first, it is essential for we people to understand what do you mean by float. Before that, let's have some discussion on the word slack. This slack terminology we have used in PERT, wherein we have estimated slack for the event is the difference of latest time and earliest time for the same event. And if you recall, we have written slack is equal to TL minus TE, and we have joined all activities with slack 0 to find critical path. Got it? Now moving ahead. So once we know this aspect, in further part, let's move. Before this, I want to emphasize one aspect, very important aspect. Maybe in PERT or CPM network, you may come across activity called as dummy activity, and I have emphasized that the use of dummy activity, it should be minimum. So let's say how one can use depending on the network and how to interpret the concept of dummy. See, this is very important network, and this network is being asked for many of the competitive exam also, such type of network. Now, suppose I name the activities A, B, C, D, E F G. This is very important network which involves the concept of application of dummy. So here interpretation is that these two A and B are concurrent activities, that is they are starting simultaneously. Further activity C depends only on C. Your network is incomplete if you don't draw the arrows. Now how to interpret? C depends only on A, D depends only on B, but if the situation demands that E, which is terminating activity, depends both on A and B. C depends only on A, D depends only on B, but this activity E depends both on A and B. If I want to show this condition of E greater than AB in this case, then I have to use this concept of dummy. So this is dummy activity, this is also dummy activity. So dummy 1 we can say, dummy 2. Now we know that dummy activity does not consume any time and resources, so time for dummy activity will be 0 and resources nil. This is called as application of dummy, simultaneous application of dummy in a network. This is one aspect. Other case of dummy, if you recall, we have studied in the beginning. Suppose this is one activity, this is other activity, or we can say, and I want to terminate this activity like this, but this activity needs, suppose I name as A, B, C, D. We have seen this concept that I can give dummy activity if this is demanding that C depends on A and B both. If it is given in the problem C is greater than A and B, then you have to use this logic. Here this is dummy, D-U-M-Y, dummy. So this is indicating C depends on A and B both, but D depends only on B. This we have seen in our earlier lectures. So this I want to emphasize, and this logic is required in both PERT and CPM. Now moving to other part, and that is critical path method, CPM. In CPM we come across floats. Slack we have seen, it is the amount of time by which occurrence of event can be delayed without affecting the predetermined. Suppose for any activity slack is 2 units of time. Again I am using the word units of time, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe months. If slack is non-zero, it won't be negative. If it is non-zero, means 1, 2. So you can delay that activity by the amount equal to slack. That is the technical interpretation of slack, which is used in case of PERT. But what float is telling, it is the amount of time by which activity can be delayed or expanded without affecting the planned project duration. So meaning is same in both cases. Slack is related with PERT, float is related with CPM. If any activity is having some value of float, means that particular activity can be delayed by the amount of time equal to float. That's all. Got it? Yes? Then how many types of floats? 4 types of floats. Total float, free float, independent float, interfering float. Floats are of 4 types in critical path method analysis. Again I am reminding, the process of drawing network is same. The process of finding critical path is same in both PERT and CPM. Forward pass calculation, backward pass calculation is same. Again we will see the same method, we will try the problem by same method as we did in PERT, but the difference is evaluation parameter. Here in CPM we are required to find value of floats. Float analysis is carried out for CPM, that I have already told. Slack analysis in PERT explained. There exists a single slack? Yes, only one slack. 4 types of slacks. I have also named what are the 4 types of slacks. Start and finish of event of critical activities have 0 or minimum slack. Slack for critical path is 0, whereas total float for critical activity is 0. This is very important. Total float for critical activity is 0. This we will see through example. Now, this we have studied critical path method. This is for finding floats, abbreviated as CPM, PERT, program evaluation and review technique. 4 types of floats I have said. One is total, first is total float. First is total float, then first is total float, followed by second is free float. Now, as a student, you have to remember these formulas. I will explain the logic behind all these formulas. These are derived formulas from the variables. TF is equal to TLJ minus TI plus TIJ. I will explain all these concepts in detail. First, I will show both the slides pertaining to types of floats. First is total float. It is the amount of time by which, total is combination of all. It is the amount of time by which completion of activity can be delayed without affecting final duration. If any activity is having some value of total float, non-zero value of total float, it means that that activity can be delayed. It means that activity can be delayed by amount equal to total float. If any activity is having some free float, how that free float is calculated? It is assumption based. What is the assumption? I have written in bold color letters. Assumption is that it is based on both successor and predecessor activities start at their earliest time. Both activities start at their earliest time. Next, independent float. How it runs? Again, it is assumption based. In independent float, what is the assumption? That successor activity occurs at its earliest time and predecessor at its latest time. Again, I will explain all this concept through example. Remember, successor activity occurs at its earliest time and predecessor at its latest time. This is the derived formula. And interfering float is nothing but it is difference between latest finish time of activity in question and earliest start time of the following activity, or 0, which is larger. So in short, it is slack, or 0, which is minimum. You have to take maximum value of 0 or slack. It is the difference between what it represents the portion of the float and activity which cannot be consumed without adversely affecting float of the subsequent activity. It is the difference between latest finish time of activity in question and earliest starting time of the following activity, or 0. You will be getting two values, one calculated value, or if not it is getting negative, then 0, and amongst that you have to take maximum value. Suppose I get value of 5 and 0, maximum is 5. If I get negative value and 0, maximum is 0. That is the meaning of this statement. Now, before going to further part, let me explain the concept in detail. I will be drawing some part of the in between part of the network. So this is very important for understanding the concept of float. Once you understand this particular diagram, things will be easy. So here we are well aware with this concept. This is event, ith event, and this is jth event. Ith event, jth event, I have taken in between part from any network. Suppose, and this is the activity under consideration. This is the activity under consideration. Here we know for this the values, various values in this cell are, these values are TE value, these values are TL value, again this value is TE value, these values are TL value, that we know. Here we are writing event number. Here we are writing event number. Here also we are writing event number, and if you know, here we are writing value of slack. Here we are writing value of slack. Got it? Some activity we can refer this. Suppose we name this as B activity, this is C activity, and this is D activity, just for understanding, sake of understanding. And now we are interested in calculating the value of floats for activity floats for activity C. Our exercise is for understanding the types of floats and values for various parameters of floats for activity C. Hypothetically, suppose I give some values. Here suppose we write time as 10 and unit of time time in units. Suppose I am giving units, maybe days, maybe weeks, I am only writing units. And suppose here what I have said, we are taking the in between part of the network and assuming we are at this particular point, we get this value as 15. Got it? We get this value as 15 and then we got some another point. Now to understand this, we know how this particular logic is applied of forward pass and backward pass. So 10 plus 15, 25. Now, with these values, let's try to understand the concept of float. This value I will be writing, this is indicating Tij. First understand total float. First will total float. It is abbreviated as TF. Total float. TF. Float, T for total. How? See, important. Now, total float is the gap available. If at all total float exists, it is the gap available between earliest start of activity to latest completion of activity minus activity time duration. See here what I am saying. For activity C, very important point I am emphasizing upon. Activity for all these floats for activity C. We are doing all this business for activity C. See students, activity C, earlier start is 15, latest completion is 25, TL, latest completion is 25. This activity C is completed, this event is completed when activity C is completed, that we have seen. So you are having the gap from earliest start to latest finish. The gap is TL of J minus TE of I. This is the gap available. C activity, total span available to perform activity C for this network is earliest start of C can be 15 units and latest completion of C can be up to 25 units. So you are having gap of these two. This is the duration available to you. But how much it takes? How much it takes? It takes 10 days TEIJ. So ultimately, if I put this in simple term, it is TLJ minus TEI minus TEIJ. which is equal to TLJ is 25 minus 15 minus 10 equal to 0. Total float for activity is equal to 0. What is the meaning? What is the implication? Till now I have kept one cell over here blank. We have studied in PERT, difference of these two is slack, slack is 0, and we have seen critical path. The activities of 0 slack on network path are critical activities. So definitely it means that C activity is critical now. Got it? And the meaning of critical activity is that delay is not permitted. The meaning of critical activity is that delay is not permitted. When delay is not permitted, then there won't be any float, and therefore underlying statement, for critical activities total float will always be 0. That we have calculated. So this is the logic, this is the technicality. TL minus TE minus TEIJ, span available 0, no span, no time units permitted, no delay. Again I will remind, this float indicates the time available for that particular activity by which you can delay that particular activity. And students, first you have to find the gap in which you can do that particular activity. Subtract activity time from the identified gap. What I mean to say gap is this gap. Gap is early start to latest finish. This gap I am available. I can start activity C at this point of time. I can end activity C at this point of time. So this is the time zone available. From this hand to this hand is the time zone available to me to perform activity C. This much time zone. And what is the time required for activity C? Equal to time zone. Gap is 10. Time zone is 10. 10 minus 10, 0. Means this activity cannot be delayed. That is total float. Second, free float. Abbreviation free float. Now it is based on the assumption. In first case, what we did is we have calculated difference of this and this corner values, first value, last corner value, and subtracted from 10. Now in total float, as we have seen in last slide, it is based on some assumption. And what is the assumption? Assumption is that both predecessor and successor at its earliest time. See, I want to find float for C. For C, this is successor. For C, this is successor. So earliest start of C is this much T, this corner value. Earliest start of successor is this much, 25. So based on the assumption, difference of earliest start time of successor and activity under consideration, that is C. Earliest start of C is 15, earliest start of successor is 25. in technical term it is T E of J minus T E of I. This is the gap available. Got it? Minus TEIJ is equal to I can again write minus. So if I did this, TEIJ is 25 minus 15 and minus TEIJ is 10. So again it comes to be 0. So total float for this activity C is again coming 0. See, typically why we are taking this example, because this particular values indicate that this activity C is critical activity. Why? Zero slack. I will make some changes for explaining further. Suppose this is non-critical, then how to estimate the values? Obviously, since we are finding for this case where this activity turns out to be critical, total float is coming 0. So, what is the difference? Early start of successor, latest finish of predecessor, difference minus activity time 0. Let's understand third float, that is independent float. Third float is independent float, IF. See, these two, free float and independent float, are based on assumptions. What is the assumption for free float? Both starts at their earliest time. Both start at their earliest time. So what we did is we took difference of earliest start. We took difference of earliest start of successor, earliest start of activity under consideration. Now for independent float, the assumption is successor activity starts at its earliest time. Successor activity starts at its earliest time means for this successor is D, early start for D is this cell T value, and predecessor activity at its latest time. This is predecessor, B is predecessor for C, latest time for B is 50, this TL. So ultimately assumption is earliest start of successor is this, a gap of earliest start of successor, latest finish of predecessor, latest completion of predecessor. So first we will write gap is TE of J minus, this is what we are writing is the technical aspect, TE of J minus latest finish of predecessor, this is predecessor, latest finish of B is this corner TL, TLI, this is the gap available, minus TEIJ will give you what? Independent float. So here it will be TEJ is 25 minus TEJ is 25 minus TL, this is not, this should be I, this should be I. TEJ 25 minus predecessor latest time TL of I, that is 15, minus activity time 10, 25 minus 15, 10 minus 10 minus 10, 0. One important conclusion we are drawing here, because such typical questions are asked in competitive exams. When you are supposed to solve network, and something lies there in the question that if you understand the logic, there is no need to calculate the values. Directly you can write the answers. Now see, I have drawn this with double arrow, meaning this activity and looking at this slack equal to 0, which joins this activity. This is critical activity, and for critical activity all slacks, all floats are 0. And we know the significance of critical activity, the activity which cannot be delayed. It must be completed within given time, and therefore also this slack indicates 0, meaning C, activity cannot be delayed. If it is 10 days, suppose the time is in days, 10 days, suppose it's in weeks, you must complete, you have to complete that activity within the stipulated time. That is the meaning. So 0, 0, 0. Got it? Clear? Now, this is the technicality involved in calculation of all these floats. 3 types of floats. And now fourth is what? Recall? Yes, interfering float. Interfering float is for the float activity under consideration. I want to find this interfering float for activity C. Now it is nothing but as the definition says, difference of values of slacks for latest completion and earliest start of the activity. Here for C, earliest start is 15, latest completion of previous is 15, 15 minus 15, it is 0. We have seen maximum value of difference or 0. Difference of what? Difference of these two values. Difference of two values indicates slack. So 0 is there if it is by chance you are getting it negative. So this is technicality involved in drawing, in estimating the values of floats. Now we'll see problem in detail and application of this concept. Keep one thing in mind, in simplified way, if you are conversant with this, for first type of float we find the differences of these two corners, this corner and this corner, minus Tij. For float we find the difference of this first and first corner, minus Tij. This is for remembering purpose I am telling. This is technical aspect. This aspect is technical aspect, but how to remember? For free flow, every time you have to find the difference. First gap, and gap minus activity time. Minus activity time is common. So now I am telling shortcut for finding the gap. For first, that is total float, gap of this first and last, minus Tij, total float. For free float, gap of first and first first corner gap minus Tij. For third type, that is independent float, gap of this and this, means which are closer to each other. For first, you can remember the farther location, for third closer location. For first farther location, for third closer location, for second free float, first location. Now suppose this activity is not critical activity. Suppose this activity is not critical activity. Which is this activity? C. If this is not critical activity, means I have to change one value. So I will change that value over here. That value is suppose 28. Now if this is 28, this 28 minus 10 will give me 18. 15 plus 10, 25. 28 minus 10, 18. If this is the case, then I will get this instead of 0 as 3. Here also I will get 3. Here I will get 3. Means this is non-critical activity now. No slack 0, and therefore now the values will change. So here for total float it will be 15 difference of, here it will be 28, here it will be 28 minus 15 minus 10, so it will be instead of 3 0, new value will be equal to 3, float of 3. Getting? Similarly other values will change. So now I have explained the concept, technical aspect, when it is critical and non-critical, all these values will change. So now go ahead. See, this is a problem. Draw the network. Draw the network. Find critical path. Total project duration. Free independent float for activity EHD. Now here specifically free float and independent floats were only asked for these activities. This can be a nature of problem. There are so many activities. This project is consisting of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 activities. Now in 9 activity, see here activity A and activity G is having dependency dash. Means as discussed, these two activities A and G will be starting activity. So you have to start your drawing from A and G like this, and then looking at now B depends on A, so we know how to logically draw. B depends on A, C depends on B, go on increasing the network, and at end wherever particular activity which you are drawn does not depend on any activity, or there is no successor activity to the activity already drawn, do not keep it as it is lying in the air. It is called as dangling situation. Terminate that activity in the last activity. That care you have to take. Now here you can see here the time duration is in single parameter, means this is deterministic. This time is deterministic, means this itself is the value of TEIJ. This itself is the value of TEIJ. What we have to do? Based on this, draw the network, find critical path, and once you find critical path, find floats for the activity as mentioned in the logic. So that I will explain through solved problem. See here, I have drawn this network from the given relationship, and here we come across with this network for the given problem, and where in this problem there is simultaneous application of dummy, because this D depends on B and E both. D depend. I have shown you such condition. D depends on B and E both, and we have also studied this aspect of representing physical formulas for forward and backward pass calculation. Now see here, these are the numbers. This column 1, I am writing 1, 2, 3. These are event number. These are event numbers, and activity names were given. These times were given. By using this forward pass, by using backward pass, we have calculated and we have estimated that last value is 30. So the project is completed in 30 days. Project is completed in 30 days. So the problem belongs to CPM category, critical path method category, where methodology till finding critical path is same. And you can see here, I will again mark that with color. This is the value of slack 0, 0, 0, 0. Whereas here the value of slack is 6, here it is 6, here it is 8, and here it is 0. So what is done? Double line arrow indicating critical path was drawn from 0 to 0 slack. So critical activities are A, B, C with project duration 30 days. What is asked? Total float. If you recall my dialogue for total float, it was like this: two locations. We were having two locations. For total float, if you recall, assumption was a gap between this and this cell. This is the formula written: gap between this cell minus TEIJ. So for E activity, the gap between this and this means these two cells. It is 17 minus 10. 17 minus 10 is 7 minus activity time 1. 17 minus 10, 17 minus 10, 7 minus activity time 1. So that gives 6. So this 6 is the result of what? How this 6 comes? It is 17 minus 10 it is 17 minus 10 minus 1 equal to 6. Similarly, this H, this is H activity, difference of first 30 minus 12. So it is 30 minus 12, 30 minus 12 minus 6, So 30 minus 12 is 18, 18 minus 6 is 12. So second value we are getting, this first value we got 6, this we got 12. And for activity D, this is the activity D, difference of 30 and 17. 30 minus 17 is 13, minus activity time is 5. 13 minus 5 is 8. So we get these final values of free float for activities asked E, H and D. Got it? Now see independent float. Independent float, if you recall, the shortcut which I have provided is, for independent float, it is the difference between these two closest corner, means difference of this corner and this corner, difference of this corner values minus Tij. So, and this is the technical formula which we have derived. So for again E first corner, second corner, first and first, 17 minus 10. So this is 17 minus 10. 17 minus 10 and gap is minus 1. So it comes 6 ultimately. For H, yes, it is inner is 30 minus, this is earlier start, this is 18 and minus 6. So for activity H, 30 minus 18, it's 12. 12 minus 6, it is 6. So this is 6, this is 6, and last is activity D. D gap is, for D gap is 30 minus 17. This is the gap available. No, 30 minus 25, not 17. 30 minus 25 is the gap available, and activity time is 5. So 30 minus 25 is 5. 5 minus 5 is 0, and this is the 0. So students, like this you have to calculate value of floats. Now here we can see that these are the non-zero values, because these activities for which we are calculating the various types of floats are non-critical activity. These are non-critical. Would these have been critical activity, the values of all these floats would have been 0. Got it? So this is how common part, again I am reminding, common part in both is drawing network, finding critical path, and forward and backward pass calculation. The difference is finding probability in PERT and floats in CPM. So practice this problem. Your mastery will be developed only if you attempt to practice more and more network. Slight change in the value of dependency parameter changes the entire network. So here today we'll stop at this point of time. So we have finished with PERT logic and CPM logic. Practice number of problems so that you develop mastery in PERT and CPM.